Faction balance has always been an ethereal and difficult to achieve goal within World of Warcraft, and for nearly 2 decades it's been a core part of the game's fantasy. Horde versus Alliance, 2 factions, 2 sides in a never-ending series of back and forth conflicts. Over the years though, more often than not, players have found themselves witnessing their faction leaders working together, and story-wise both sides putting differences aside to address a greater evil. The Lich King himself during his named expansion, Deathwing the Destroyer in Cataclysm, Garrosh Hellscream's True Horde during Mists of Pandaria, and so many more. During Battle for Azeroth, Blizzard reimagined servers from either PvE or PvP to instead just normal or RP. A new PvP mode known as War Mode was introduced. This could be toggled on or off at your faction capital, and whilst you had it on in the open world, it was like playing on old PvP servers. However, with additional PvP specific talents activated, as well as boosts to experience and reputation, it was all about adding some risk and reward. And in the final major content patch of the Shadowlands 9.25, differences have finally been cast aside permanently as Blizzard implement cross-faction play for certain areas of the game, changing the direction of the 2 factions forever. Before we go on though, I want to talk about food buffs. No, not in game, I'm talking about getting well fed in real life. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal prep kit. No more meal planning, grocery trips and worrying about an empty cupboard. HelloFresh delivers everything you need to prepare wholesome, delicious meals right to your door. Get straight down to what you need to be doing by making cooking a fun and engaging experience. HelloFresh cuts down on time in the kitchen with meals ready in around 30 minutes or in some cases, less. With a wide range of recipes, HelloFresh can help you with your health goals without sacrificing on flavor, which in my experience certainly matters on the longer term commitments. HelloFresh gives you the pre-proportioned ingredients you need to make awesome meals with less prep and less wasted food. It's worth at least trying for so many different life skill reasons. It teaches you how to, you know, cook stuff and have it coming out naturally tasting nice. It's a live lesson on what foods are great when you put them together. It gets you using realistic portion sizes instead of going to cook hungry, putting what you think is a bit of pasta into the pan, and it comes out being enough for a small family when it's done. HelloFresh as a meal prep kit is genuinely worth a go if you find yourself over-ordering, wanting to swap to a better diet, or just to spend less time cooking and getting better results. Use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use code POGWillie August 16th for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 surprise gifts. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases, so go check it out like it's your Dalaran cooking dailies. Thank you to HelloFresh for the sponsor. Let's talk WoW. Back over in Classic, well, we are certainly a few years off of that happening. In fact, in many ways, we are seeing similar trends repeat themselves, however at an even faster pace than they did in retail. Players are a lot more savvy nowadays to important factors that make a server work or fail. The faction representation, the total population, and of course, server type. We still do have the old school PvP servers. Well, I call them PvP servers, but as we will see, that's not really why people are choosing to play there. Now, I have to add here, for the information we'll look at, we don't have the full picture as to the population and a really accurate faction representation across servers, and we never will because Blizzard holds that information. What we do have though is fairly good ways of predicting how things look. One of these tools is a site called ironforge.pro. It tracks the number of players participating in Arena each week, as well as the number of characters who have appeared on Warcraft Logs, a site that tracks raid performance. This means the data is representative of the end game player base much more so than the levelers, gatherers, or just, well, more casual players who don't do group content outside of dungeons really. All the same, I think it's been a valuable tool to assist players in making decisions on where to play, as well as tracking how things are looking overall. Because that overall number, the one at the top, has never been too bad. As of today, there's a few percent more Horde than Alliance, and it's always been within that small margin overall. In Classic, there was a higher proportion of Alliance players, and now that's taken a shift to Horde in TBC. And racials and everything else aside, I'm convinced Blood Elves and Horde Paladins are the single largest contributor to this by a huge margin. Yet the more we peel back the layers servers and begin to look at more relevant numbers as to how things are, well, it just looks worse and worse. If we look at only PvE servers, some 65% of the player base is Alliance. That's not such a small margin after all. But hey, that's PvE, it doesn't matter as much, right? Well, sure, so let's look at PvP then. And not so good either. Overall about 60% Horde, 40% Alliance. Well, that would mean in the open world, for every 2 Alliance players you would encounter, you should expect there to be 3 Horde on average. But no, in reality, it's worse than this, because on an individual basis for each server, which is what really matters when we're breaking down these numbers, from the data we can see, the vast majority of PvP servers fall outside of this 60-40 margin. In fact, most of the large servers in the world only have one relevant faction on them. Players have sorted themselves into environments where they will not experience any semblance of faction balance at all. And for Wrath the Lich King, you should very much expect this trend to continue, because when the scales begin to tip, when a faction gains that noticeable foothold and advantage over the other one, it's only a matter of time before the other half leaves for good. Over time, Blizzard has tried to incentivize players to move to servers that would balance things out more through free character migrations, but it's never really worked out. After all, who would choose to move to a server that could also just die off in a few months' time? Blizzard would have to quite literally force move players to make any difference, and with Wrath of the Lich King, they will be doing that. It was announced a short while ago, Blizzard will be closing off loads of the very low population Classic realms and moving the leftover players to more active servers instead. They have never done this in the history of World of Warcraft existing. It's a drastic step to address players feeling as though they have to be on a large server. Drastic as it is, however, it's not really affecting that many people overall. But speaking of large servers, we have what is the real subject for today's video: Firemaw. Firemaw, the server that is. It's been through one hell of a journey. At the start of the Burning Crusade, it had a decent population, pretty close to 50-50, with more Horde overall and a raiding cap of around 10,000 players. In January of 2022, the server saw a huge volume of transfers on both sides of the Horde and the Alliance. Guilds tend to organize mass server swaps on a certain date from their current server, where they feel things are going poorly, to a much larger one, and with the popularity of Discord and guildmasters generally talking to each other about things like this, it doesn't take many people to convince potentially hundreds that they're being swept up and off to another server if they wish to remain with the guild. And mostly these transfers aren't just on a whim either. You scroll down ironforge.pro and there is an absolute graveyard of servers that are due to be closed soon. Remember, on Classic there's no sharding, no cross-faction, no cross-server tech. Your server is all you have in order to find other players to play with. And as per available data, Firemaw's raiding and PvP population ballooned from some 22,000 at the end of December 2021 to an insane 35,000 by the end of January 2022. It had taken the server from huge to the largest server in the world within the space of 1 month. Though interestingly, at this point in time, the server was still gaining players on both the Horde and Alliance. Usually it's one way or the other, and Firemaw continued to grow as TBC progressed, seemingly infinitely, even to the point of seeing dreaded queues make a reappearance during summer. Yes, for Firemaw, they didn't have to wait until Wrath content is out before they got queues again. The server just got way too full. On the 23rd of May, Blizzard finally took action. At some point they had to do something, and this was it. Firemaw was locked. This means that transfers were closed, and unless you already had a character on the server, you were unable to make a new one. The results of this were pretty instantaneous. Week on week, several thousand less players were being actively tracked on ironforge.pro. From the date of the server lock to 6 weeks later, some 11,000 less players were found as actively logging in and playing. While the lock had certainly had the intended result, the server wasn't growing anymore. In fact, the opposite was happening. The population was now dropping at an alarming rate. Though it wasn't just through the lack of new players, people were finally leaving Firemaw. This is what Blizzard have been trying to get people to do forever with their actions in regards to servers. Success then? not quite. See, despite Firemaw being huge and relatively well balanced for its size, Alliance had had the numbers advantage for some time, and this server lock had been an unintended catalyst for a side effect, the faction minority exodus. Horde began to finally take advantage of the free character migrations away from this mega server to a smaller server perhaps? A place where the Horde needed a few more players to really push a 50-50 balance? No, of course not, don't be silly. The majority of them went straight to Gehennas, the largest by far Horde-dominated server in Europe, which as of a recent reset had about 20,000 Horde players logged and some 69 Alliance. Ironforge.pro shows the full extent of how many players left during a 1-week period, and even I'm surprised at this. It feels like the people left on Firemaw didn't get the memo. This is an Alliance server now. Between the 6th and the 13th of July, Firemaw lost about 8,000 active raiding characters. That's like saying 320 25-man raiding groups have left the server, and the majority have gone straight to a server where there's only Horde players. During the same time frame, which was only a week mind you, Gehennas gained 6,000 new active raiders. In fact, so many players have moved from Firemaw to Gehennas that Blizzard had to close free character transfers to stop the never-ending tide of new people who were finally escaping their locked server. As of July 19th, Blizzard have finally announced that Firemaw will be reopened for transfers and new characters. The aftermath of the server lock has lost Firemaw about half of its concurrent player base and completely removed one faction from the server. I mean, take a look at the bulletin board add-on for Horde here. This add-on combines messages from all chat channels and aims to help players find groups and services. This is not what a healthy server looks like on this add-on. Here's Firemaw Alliance, just for comparison by the way. So the server lock, it kind of worked in that it reduced the number of people playing on Firemaw, but it kind of didn't because it encouraged the Horde to transfer to another mega server. Back in January of 2022, the Classic Community Council made a forum post about faction balance in Classic World of Warcraft, to which game producer Agrend replied on all fronts in detail as to thoughts from Blizzard's point of view, saying things such as free character migrations have been attempted on many counts as relief valves, but often players didn't want to go to the locations offered with justifiable concerns they would just have the same experience as their current server. Merging for Blizzard didn't make sense. In fact, it's never been done for any version of World of Warcraft. They assume if servers are the way they are, and that's an environment that's been built by players, why would you force them to change it? Would they consider incentivizing people playing on low population servers? If so, how? Would they consider capping factions perhaps? Well, they said it would limit player choice way too much given how we know servers tend to end up. How about free transfers but for one specific faction, which is becoming problematic? For this regard, he says it's fairly conclusive that players do not take advantage of free character migrations or paid transfers to move to the underdog faction. It's just not something that happens to a degree to move the needle in a positive direction, and offering that move as the only option that players have for free transfers is likely not going to be positively received by players who are unhappy with their current realm. What about cross-realm play then? Is this just the endgame for World of Warcraft servers? For this he says, what if it was restricted to only people on your friends list or in the same community as you? What if this only worked in instance content? These are a few things that might be cool to explore. It's definitely worth talking about more, but this is something we'd really have to think long and hard about. Perhaps most interestingly, he says, overall the data we have suggests that players don't seem to want an even playing field or they care more about having their faction be heavily populated and lively than they care about their realm being balanced. It really is quite a complicated system. Take Firemaw for instance. Blizzard does nothing, the population over triples from the start of TBC. They take action and nearly half of the player base goes and one faction entirely leaves. In many ways this kind of feels like the retail faction balance conversation all over again. By the way, despite having cross-server play for years, retail realms are by no means balanced either. Certain content can only be done by players from the same server, and the auction house is still a thing too. Nevertheless, balance was an active talking point for years and years, with Blizzard saying, we're talking about it, we're aware, we're thinking about it, we're considering our options, and all that time the solution loomed, the drastic step that everybody knew would really solve things, but it felt as though it couldn't be justified until it was, and that was cross-faction play. In Classic, it's similarly been a day one talking point. Blizzard are trying trying to fix things, they're aware of the problem, but what's our obvious solution that we all know would fix things? Surely not sharding and cross-server play. We have seen firsthand with retail, it doesn't work out long-term still. Players seem to just want big servers with one faction on them. Should there only be a handful of mega servers per region with a huge amount of layering? What about the war mode model instead of PvP and PvE servers? Is that what Classic is missing? But the ball is in Blizzard's court to make a decision if anything will truly change, because player trends won't. And Blizzard can make the difference. Firemaw has shown that even the largest server in the world isn't immune to drastic change when Blizzard takes action. As of today, despite overall faction balance standing within a few % of each other across all tracked servers, only 5 of those servers are within a 5% faction balance average between the Horde and the Alliance. But hey, there's the Wrath Classic Fresh servers. Surely things will be different this time. I mean, Blizzard hopes so. There totally won't be one Horde server and one Alliance server. Surely it won't happen again. One of the big reasons a lot of people came back to World of Warcraft and rolled a PvP server back at the start of Classic was for the open world, for their conflicts, and for PvP experiences that you could no longer find in retail. And we didn't even have to wait for flying for that illusion to be shattered. In reality, things have followed the same path as retail, but at an even faster rate. If you're new or returning for Wrath of the Lich King, this is kind of how things are now. I would use the site ironforge.pro to get a good impression of where people are playing. It will also let you know whether your server is dead without you having to pay to log in and find out yourself. Overall though, when it comes to any semblance of faction balance, it feels like all the solutions aren't working. Maybe there just isn't one. Maybe having static servers with 2 factions just doesn't work as a good long-term format for an MMORPG. But if Classic is to be different from retail, it has to do things differently from retail, all while sticking to those design pillars that they went over not too long ago. And honestly, I've no idea what they could realistically do. And I'd usually try and propose my own ideas here, but I've really nothing that either hasn't already been suggested a million times over, or completely breaks the whole nurture and protect social experiences aspect of the game. So I guess let me know below if you've been affected by any server problems, felt the need to transfer. Also, if you have any idea of what could be done to improve things in the game, drop that down below as well. That's about everything from me today though. As always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you all in the next one very soon.